name is Jeff Krauke, and I am part of the Mastermind Consulting Network, and we appreciate your joining for our seminar today. And our featured speaker today is Tom Borg, and he is the founder and president of Tom Borg Consulting. And he will be leading the presentation today. Tom is a business consultant and thought leader who works at the intersection of leadership, communication, and culture. For over 25 years, he has worked with his clients and their leadership teams to help them connect, communicate, and work better together. Tom does this through his consulting, one-on-one executive mentoring, coaching, workshops, seminars like we're working on today, training and assessment instruments, and job benchmarking tools. Today, Tom's going to present his program called Building Trust and Rapport in a Digital World. So Tom, if you are ready, go for it.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you very much. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the program. Good to see you there, Brian and Jeff and Michael and all the other folks that are here. Glad you're here. Let's get started. So with that said, a little bit, Jeff just summarized for us there a little bit about myself. And let's move ahead here. So as the story goes, it's a guy by the name of Michelangelo, the great Italian sculptor. Now, this guy was so famous in his own day, famous for painting the Sistine Chapel, the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel. He did some tremendous sculptures. They're just a tremendous artist and sculptor. Well, one day he was out wheeling this huge block of marble, and he was going to do his next creation. And off in the distance, one of his friends saw him, and his friend called out. He says, "Hey, Michael, hold up. I got a question for you." Well, with that, Michelangelo wasn't about to set that wheelbarrow down because it was so heavy. He just kept on moving. He says, "Giuseppe, you want to ask me a question? You come over here." And he kept on wheeling this wheelbarrow, and Giuseppe catches up with him and says, "Hey, Mike," he said, "how do you do it? How do you take that ugly block of marble and create those beautiful sculptures?" Well, Michelangelo heard this. He knew he was going to have to do some explaining. So with that, he brought his wheelbarrow to a halt, set it down with a thud, brought out a kerchief, wiped his brow, looked back at his friend and said, "Giuseppe," he said, "you got it all mixed up." He said, "What you just called this ugly block of marble, what she already has that a beautiful sculpture inside of it. All Michelangelo do is going to knock off the rough edges, polish it up, let the real beauty come out." And that's exactly what we're going to do here today. You already have what it takes to learn how to become digitally competent. Many of you are already. You just want to get a little bit better. So we're going to give you some tools to do it more easily. So with that said, the purpose of today's program, in another view, is to help you examine or re-examine your paradigms about communicating in a digital world. Now, you should have a workbook that was sent to you. Hopefully you're able to download that and print it off, because I do believe that when you're able to write things down, and in this workbook, we have places we can fill in the blanks, you actually have a neurological connection that happens between your fingers and your brain, and you'll actually retain that information that much better. So if you don't have it, you can just sit back and listen, take notes on the side, and the recording will be available later. But I do want to encourage you to use that workbook if you can, or take notes.
Tom, I did put the link to the workbook in the chat, so if people want to get a chance to download it, if they didn't get to, it's there for them.
Thank you. Thanks, Chris. Yeah, so go ahead and take a moment to download that and print it off if you can. It will be worth it. It's quite a bit of content in that workbook, so I think you'll like it. All right, so with that said, let's go ahead. Quick housekeeping guidelines. I encourage you to please turn your cell phones off. Typically what I do is I'll take my landline, I'll take it right out of the receiver, so I get no challenges there, and I'll close my door. All my pets are away, etc. So main thing is turn your cell phones off. And the next thing I'd love you to do, just be here, get into this program. Only have it for about another 47 minutes, 48 minutes. Let's make the most of the time, and you'll walk away with some very valuable information, I believe. So let's go to the workbook. Number one. Now, I don't have slides for every part of this workbook. I'll give you a few slides that will correspond to the workbook, but we're going to pretty much follow the workbook. So number one, a definition for digital communication, to get it started off. The activities that transmit messages and information via digital channels. Now you can circle the word digital in your workbook, and they'll kind of emphasize the fact that that's what we're talking about here. So it means emails, text, video conferencing, everything else that you can throw into that. That's what we're talking about when we're talking about digital communication. Now here's a term some of you might be familiar with, some of you may not, but digital natives. That's the word I want you to put in there under number 2, natives, N-A-T-I-V-E-S. That's the word in red. Now, these are people who have grown up under the omnipresent influence of the internet and other modern information technologies. They're typically born after 1980. All right, so that's number 2. Number 3, maybe some of you are like me, digital immigrant. And we're born before 1980. So that would be the word immigrants. So one thing we know for sure, immigrants are in the mode of adapting, and some of us are better at it than others. And I will tell you this, the better we get at it, the more in sync with the times we're going to be. So let's go to number 4. So digital body language. Now that's a term that's been out there for a while now, quite a bit of information out there on the internet. But what digital body language is everything we do or say, or how about this, don't do or say online, that we can analyze to understand each other and what we want to do. Now, in today's program, we'll be diving into some of those things so that you'll see firsthand what it is you could do or stop doing. And that'll help us all get closer to our goals. Now, here's something some of us are already familiar with or using, but emojis. Now, that's number 5A. That's the word. It's actually a Japanese word, and it comes from 2 words, meaning picture, and emoji, meaning character. So E stands for picture and emoji is the character. And it had to be invented because with emails and texts, you just can't get the emotions from words. So someone somewhere invented these emojis, and there are all kinds of them that are out there. Now, the interesting thing about emojis, I should say this, is that there's a purpose for them. And the primary function of an emoji is to fill in emotional cues otherwise missing from a type conversation. Is that true or false? So in your book, circle the one you think is correct. Or no, we'll do that for right now. Just circle the one in your book that you think is correct. Is the primary function of an emoji to fill in emotional cues, otherwise missing from a type conversation, or is there some other reason? Well, the answer is it's true. That's what their purpose is. Okay, let's go on. So the use of emojis, this is a little extra here. In the use of emojis across generations, it's important to understand preferences and knowing when to adapt to others' needs and when to set proper boundaries. Let's go into Erica Dewan, one of the gurus out there on digital body language. So here's the point. Certain circles, certain businesses, they embrace emojis and their teams use them. In other cultures, they don't. Or there are certain ones they do use. So you have to know which emojis are acceptable that don't cross the line, so to speak, when it comes to sharing your emotions. All right, let's go to number 6, another quiz for us. What is the average percentage of all communication among work teams that is virtual? So looking at number A, is it 50%? Is it 60%? 70%? In your workbook, circle the one you think is correct. The average percentage of all communication among teams that is virtual. All right, I'll give you the answer. Here it comes. The answer is 70%. It's that high. It is that high today. That's just the way it is. All right, let's go to number 7. Next part of a quiz. Worldwide, we send approximately 305 billion emails every day, with the average person receiving A, 30 to 75, B, 30 to 200, 30 to 250. Circle the one you feel is correct. That's a lot of emails. So I think some of you may be thinking, well, it's probably, well, here it is. It is B, 30 to 200. Now, you'll get different answers out there. When I was researching this, there were some sites that were saying it was as high as 1,000 emails a day. Well, it depends what business you're in, I suppose, what your position is, but that's something to consider. All right, next, number 8. Let's go on to the next one here. According to the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology, 50% of the time, the tone of our emails is misinterpreted. True or false? Well, that's a lot, 50%. Well, the answer is true. 50% of the time, the tone of our emails is misinterpreted. So that's, and we'll talk a little bit more about that, what you do, what you don't want to do when you're using these emails. All right, so enough of the slides. We're going to go back to the workbook. And here's some things for you to fill in there. Number 9, in the 2015 Pew survey, it found that 90, that's the number, 90% of cell phone owners frequently carry their phones with them. So 90% of them carrying with them. And how about this? With 76% of them admitting they rarely or never turn off their cell phone. So just briefly, let's do a little survey in the chat box there. How many people are of the first one? There are 90% of the cell phone owners frequently carry their phones with them. So if you carry your phone with them, you carry your phone with you frequently, just go ahead and put that in the chat box. Say yes, frequently. And if you are a person that admits to rarely or never turning off your cell phone, then put in there, never turn it off. So just go and list that in there and see what we have for an answer there, Chris. As you can just read back some of the things you're seeing up there. Or Jeff, if you're there, let's see what we have. Just to
It's
take a
very
kind of,
surprising that so many folks it's never turned off.
wow, see, it's amazing. That's how much we've adapted in this environment today. Okay, great. Let's go ahead. Next one. Number 10, the average person spends nearly 116 minutes every day on social media. That's a lot of time, which over an average lifetime would add up to 5 years and 4 months. So, you see this a lot when you go into the bank or credit union. Sometimes when they're not busy, you'll see them on their iPhones, and certain places will allow that and others won't. Let's go to number 11. Today, with the help of Daniel Goleman's emotional intelligence, that's the word, emotional intelligence, and empathy, that's the other word for number 11. These have become buzzwords. I know some of you out there like Brian, he's really well versed in emotional quotient assessment that's being used. So that's important. Be aware of that. But Daniel Goleman, some good information out there. He's got a number of books. He's one of the gurus on EQ, or emotional intelligence, to be a person worth looking into. Let's go on number 12. Research has shown that the business owners and CEOs who have the highest EQ, this is from Daniel Goleman, highest EQ, that's the word highest EQ intelligence, typically have the most successful and profitable companies. Something to be said about emotional intelligence. Number 12, research has shown that business owners, we just did that one. Let's go to number 13. Reading emotion within the digital nature of the modern workplace is difficult. That's the word, difficult, to say the least. It's so easy to misinterpret what people are saying or what they're not saying. And we'll talk more about that later. But
Hey, Tom, are these on slides? Because we're still stuck on a
no slides. We're just referring to the workbook now.
Gotcha.
That is correct, Chris. Thanks for
sure.
asking. Thank you. That's why you want to get that workbook. And if not, the recording will be available for later. Okay, thank you. Right, so number 14. Digital disconnect leads us to misinterpret, overlook, or ignore signals and cues, or overreact to them, creating entirely new waves of organizational dysfunction. That's a pretty powerful statement. There's a lot of dysfunction in the workplace today, but this creates even more of it when we're not able to understand other people and what it is they're trying to communicate to us through the internet. All right, let's go on to the next section. Now we're going to go back to number B. Now this is back to your workbook again, but this little slide will introduce this section. There's a digital body language quiz right below. I'll read the questions off. You go ahead and answer the questions. Or if you don't have the book in front of you, just go ahead and answer them on a sheet of paper. So remembering what a digital native is, that's a person born before, that's a person born after 1980. What are you? Are you a digital native or are you a digital adapter? Adapters are born before 1980. Natives are born after 1980. So go ahead, write that down. Next question for you. How does this demographic affect how you perceive daily communications? So whether you're a native or an adapter, how do you suppose that affects the way you perceive these daily communications? Does it make you less tolerant of other people who depend heavily on social media or texting or emails? What is it that how does it affect you? Number 3, what are the best channels for others to digitally communicate with you? So this is critical. I do this with all my clients. I will tell them up front, hey, here's the best way to communicate with me. Number 1, call me on my cell phone. Number 2, text me. Those are the top 2. If you don't get any response, try an email. But it's important to let people know this prevents some of these miscommunications from happening in the first place. So right off the bat, that's something you may want to do. Number 3, what are the best channels for others to digitally communicate with you? Now, number 4, do you know the best channels to digitally communicate with your clients and customers? So have you asked them that question? Say, by the way, I'd like to know up front, what's the best way for me to reach out to you? And I'm trying to connect with you or communicate with you. Is it cell phone? Is it texting? Is it in person? For heaven's sakes, who knows? But you need to get that up front. And it does change a bit with the different generations, which we'll talk a little bit later, how they prefer to be communicated to primarily. So that would be number 4. So number 5, how about this? And I'd like you to jot these down in the chat. What are some of your digital body language pet peeves? In other words, things that bug you that other people do when they're communicating with you digitally. So if we can put those in the chat, and Jeff, if you could read those off for us as they come in, we'll share that with everyone.
Okay. Blurry camera, window behind them, poor audio quality.
Yeah.
Multitasking when you're doing something like this.
Keep them coming, folks.
No smiling faces.
No smiling faces.
Or the sound is off, which we all have challenges with on occasion.
Mm-hmm.
Poor background selection. Yeah, here's a big one, using code or buzzwords in a text.
Yeah. We'll talk about some of those acronyms later, but yeah. What else? What are some of the other pet peeves? You know, you've been on a call and something happens during that call, or maybe something doesn't happen. The call doesn't happen for some reason.
So this one goes back to the background. Lots of junk in the room.
Mm-hmm.
Somewhat cluttered.
Sure.
And not making contact with or eye contact with the camera.
Ah, very good.
And personal pet peeve of mine, eating or drinking.
Yeah, that can be a big one. Yeah, absolutely. Others, anything else that people can think about that are pet peeves of theirs?
A lot of it is Tom is, brought around, and I have this too, is no feedback at all with people or what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like you're sending something, but you're just being ignored.
Yes. Yeah, you don't know if you're being ignored, but you're assuming that because they haven't responded. Yeah, absolutely. That could be part of it. Anything else you see on there, Jeff? We've added?
A lot of something in emails or text and just okay. Okay. Not quite sure what that one is, but and people need to articulate better communications, which is true. People
Sure.
sort of assume things, and you're not in their mind a lot of times. They need to be more explanative.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. Well, let's move ahead. I think we got some ideas there. All right. Number 6. So what do you value most when others communicate with you? I.e., clarity or accountability, actionableness. I mean, what is it that you appreciate most in other people who are communicating with you digitally? What are some of the good things that people do to make it work? And if you could just jot that right in the old chat box here for Jeff to read off for us. Some things you appreciate that other people do when they're communicating digitally.
These two may work together, being brief and clarity. The wordiness gets everybody. It just drags on and on. punctuality. And that's a good thing for all of us for appointments, is being punctual and on time.
We're going to talk a little bit about that later as well.
Here's a great one, which even in regular communications, listen to understand and to reply, not just to reply.
Nice.
And once again, providing feedback. You know, show the web page of the subject being discussed, which is great.
Okay, so that's good. We got some feedback there. Let's move on. That by the way, that source for that that little quiz comes from Erica Dewan. A great book, by the way, she's got out there. It's called Digital Body Language. Recommend you put that on your reading list. Okay, so let's move ahead. We're going to go to our next slide here. Now we're going to the top 12 virtual communication mistakes. But before we get into those, I got a little activity for you to participate in here. I want you to take a look at these numbers. And what is the reason for the logical sequence of these numbers? I guarantee you, there's a logical sequence. Take a look at it. And when you do have that, just put it in the chat, whatever that might be. There is a logical sequence for these numbers. What is it?
Skip one number.
Okay, that's when I skip one number. Just put your answer right in the old chat box. And Jeff will read it off for us and we'll share those answers.
This is Duffy. No logical sequence.
Oh, there you go. No logical sequence. That could be what it is.
And then there's some of us that have no idea, which I am one of them.
Okay. Any more coming in, Jeff?
Alphabetical order.
Ah, all right. Stop right there. Yes, yes, yes. Whoever said that. Who said that? Who was that?
That's Michael Schwartz.
Michael, way to go, Michael. Very good. Yeah, here you go. There they are. Look what we got. It's 8, which is an E, right? F is a 5. FI is 5. FO is 4. 9, 7, 6, 3. See, now here's my point. Here's why we did this. And I see some of you smiling. See, so often we assume certain things when we're communicating with others digitally, and we are not seeing what is really there. I mean, this is very simple. If we had to get out of that paradigm, we had to get out of that mode. Oh, must be a mathematical thing, right? Because I see numbers, but wait a minute. We got to bring in the English language, how we spell things out. So the point here is, too often our paradigms are skewed as to seeing what's really in front of us. It's a great little exercise. Feel free to use that with any of your clients as well. Okay, so that's it. Alphabetical order. Thank you once again. So let's go back to the workbook now, and I'm going to start walking through some things that come from Pamela Lagoya. And these are some things. Here's what it is: the 12 top virtual communication mistakes that people make. And I'm going to walk through these. I'll talk a little bit about them as we go. So first and foremost, below, some of the most common communication blunders made in virtual communication. As more of the workforce becomes remote, we need to be aware of these errors and how to correct them. So let's go with number 1, talking in public places while in transit. It can be very annoying for other people that are in the vicinity. Let's say you're in an elevator, or you're in a subway, or even now I know they have a sign at my credit union says, please stop all conversations when you're in line waiting to be served. So this is important. So talking in public places can be very annoying. So this is something you don't want to do. It's one of the virtual communication mistakes. Second, and we all are guilty of this to some extent, trying to, here's the word, multitask, right? Do 2 things at once. And, we don't do either one of them very well when that happens. Let me give you a quick example of that. I need someone to work with me who'd like to volunteer. I'll do a little exercise. Just need one person, and we just need to unmute them, whoever that is that wants to try this out. Do I have any volunteers? Brian Driscoll, I know you're an achiever. I know you're an achiever, and you are. I know your background, buddy. So, how would you be willing to work with me on this? Okay, great. Go ahead and unmute yourself. Can we unmute Brian? Brian Driscoll.
I was getting there. Hello.
Okay, great. Thank you, Brian. Hey, I'm glad you're with us today, Brian. Hey, so here's what it is. I want to first, I want to ask you, do you know your ABCs? Can you give me your ABCs in order? Just go start at A and go ahead.
A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P, Q, R, S, T, U, V, W, X, Y, Z.
Fantastic. This guy's good. Now we know we have a winner here. Now, all right. Now I want you to give me the numbers from 1 to 100, but I want you to give them to me backwards, just the numbers. So start at 100 and count backwards.
199, 98, 97, 96, 95, etc.
Okay. Now this guy's good. No doubt about it. Now we're going to bring in this little viewpoint of multitasking. So here's what I want you to do. I want you, yeah, you're good. I want you to start off by giving me an A and then go to 100 and then go to B and then go to 99 and just count, put those two together as you accelerate the A's to Z and then you go from 100 to 1. So go.
A to A100, B99, C98, D97, E96.
Okay, stop right there, Brian. Thank you so much. You did a great job. Let's give him some appreciation. Little applause there for him. Thank you. So here's what was happening. It's very difficult for you, for any person to do what he was trying to do. And that is you're trying to get your left part of your brain working with your right part of the brain, right? Because the left part, that's logical, gets things in order. And then you're trying to use the other side of the brain when you're trying to put these two things together. So what I'm saying is that's kind of what happens when we're on the phone with somebody and we're tapping on the keyboard, trying to send an email to somebody else. Or maybe we're looking at the latest text that came in on our phone and we're in a meeting and we're supposed to be listening to what the CEO is talking about. You see what I'm saying? So when multitasking can be a very bad thing if we try to do it. We're never going to be good at both things at the same time. So point is, don't try to multitask. You'll be better off for it. Let's go next. Number 3, talking on speakerphone. That's the word, speakerphone. It can be very annoying to people. Now, depending, you may want to check, say, hey, I mean, we have some pretty good iPhones today that do a pretty good job, but just make sure if you are speaking on speakerphone, it's the other person finds the volume acceptable and it's not annoying. That's, I think we find more of the annoyance on the landline phones that are on speakerphone because it picks up so much of the background noise. But that's a suggestion. Next, number 4, forgetting team members' time zones. So if you're talking to someone across the country and they're in Pacific time and you're in Eastern time, you may call them at a time that it may not be appropriate, or vice versa. Or if they're in another country, that becomes a sticky situation. Number 5, being ignorant of cultural or religious differences. That's the word, differences. So I've got something listed there. For instance, Israel's Sabbath is from sundown on Friday through their time through sundown on Saturday. So if you're calling someone from that particular group, you would be violating their Sabbath if you were to call them on a Friday. So something to think about. Number 6, not considering others' communication comfort zones. Others' communication zones or comfort zones. So what I'm saying is this: some people do not like to be on Zoom. You know, and if it doesn't have to, they don't have to be on Zoom. Don't make them be on Zoom. You know, many times people might have to get dressed or they might have to do something different to be prepared, and they just don't want to be on Zoom. So to honor that, if that's possible. So that's something to think about. So understanding that. Number 7, being unprepared for phone meetings, or it could be a Zoom meeting. And what we mean by that is, like Jeff was talking about earlier, you know, ahead of time, make sure your pets are put away, the door is shut, make sure you have a sign on the outside of the door, say, hey, do not interrupt, I'm on a conference call. But being unprepared for phone meetings. Have a checklist. I have a little checklist in front of me. I make sure my landline's unplugged, my iPhone is on mute, my door's closed, and dogs are away. That's just part of it there. So that's something to think about. Now, let's go to the next one here. Failure to plan for disruptions. So give me a second here. The word is the plan for disruptions. Now, what I like to do right now is share with you a short video clip. It may take me just a moment to set this up. But what I want you to do is very short. Be watching as we get this thing rolling. Here we go. And we're going to make sure we share the sound. Okay. So I won't say anything. Just watch what happens.
Happen all the time. The question is, how do democracies respond to those scandals?
And what will it mean for the wider region? I think one of your children has just walked in. I mean, shifting sands in the region. Do you think relations with the North may change?
I would be surprised if they do. Pardon me.
That's right, carry on.
My apologies.
What's this going to mean for the region?
My apologies. South Korea's policy choices on North Korea have been severely limited in the last 6 months to a year.
All right. Can you imagine that happening? That happened 4 years ago. National global television. That's a global correspondent. The whole world saw it. Later he came on, I think a few months later, and because it had so many hits, that video had so many hits, millions of hits. He came on and he just said, hey, I'm a human being, and they had a good laugh about it. But what I'm saying is, hopefully nothing as bad as that happens when you're on a call. But the key here is to be prepared, because you never know. And that's all I want to say about that. Just be prepared. That's the best form of anything that we can do there. All right, let's go back to our PowerPoint slide here. All right, so back to the workbook. All right, let's go to number 9, writing chain letters. Now, what we mean by that is, let's say, you're in an organization and someone sends out an email to everybody. And then what some of the people will use that email for is they want to keep corresponding back and forth with somebody that was originally sent to. And so they'll keep including everybody else when they have this conversation going long after the original email was sent out. And that can become very annoying, and also can cause some real issues if something is said in there that everybody views that maybe they shouldn't be seeing in the first place. So that's something to keep my writing chain letters. That's a big no-no. Number 10, sending texts or emails impulsively. That's the word, impulsively. I know I've been guilty of that. I don't know how many of us have been all guilty of that, but we send something back and we want to respond real quick and shouldn't have sent it. Something was wrong, or we didn't have all the information. So that's something to keep in mind. All right, let me do something else here. I don't need to have that up right now. So let's go to number 11, not using common sense. Common sense. What is common sense? Well, I guess common sense is what the definition for common sense is doing the right thing uncommonly often. So there's something to think about. Just using some common sense before you'd say anything or do anything on the internet. And the number 12, assuming readers know how you feel. So whoever you're sending this information to, you're assuming that they already know how you feel, and that's not something that is to be assumed, because we know what happens then. So don't do that. Now, I've added a couple extras here. So most of us know this, but surprisingly some don't. Number 13, using all caps means what? Put that in the chat. What does using all caps mean when you're sending an email to somebody? Just put it right in the old chat box. What to say there, Jeff?
Shouting, yelling, angry.
Yes. You don't want to do that. It just upsets people, and we might be meaning well, but by using all caps, you can be miscommunicating very strongly. All right, and then next, number 14, this one here, not mirroring the person you are communicating with, not mirroring. Now, let me talk about that a little bit. You know how we mirror people when we're in a live conversation with them, when we're in person? You know, you might want to, if they fold their arms, you fold their arms, they cross their legs, you cross their, we can do the same thing while we're doing communication through the internet. Now, if I do this, if a person says, hi, Tom, when they send me an email, I'm going to use the word hi, Joe, when I send one back to them, right? If they use my name, I'm certainly going to use their name, right? In a text, maybe they don't use my name. They just send the message. Okay, I'll do the same thing. So you kind of mirror what they're doing. That just allows you to get in sync with them a little bit more, allows them to feel more comfortable when they're communicating with you. So those are little things that you can do. All right, so let's move ahead. On to the next section here. I'll go back to share screen. And what we got here? Okay. So part D, I do want to give you this. This is not in your workbook, but there's the word out there is called netiquette. Netiquette. And netiquette is essentially rules and norms for interacting with others on the internet in a considerate and respectful way. So important to be respectful of other people when you're on the internet. Ashley Brooks from Rasmussen University shared that with us. All right. Oh, we did the failure options. Great. Let's go on to 20 sins not to commit on video calls. 20 sins not to commit on video calls. So this is back to your workbook again. So these things you don't want to do, and I'll make a couple comments as we go. So first, number one, you don't put your cell phone or landline on silent mode before the call. So the word silent mode there. Those are the words you want to put in there. So in other words, you get on the call and boom, off goes your cell phone. That can be disrupting. So you don't want to do that. Next, number two, your video is turned off. This used to be seen as optional, yet keeping it on is the best way to build trust and rapport. So I know today, a lot of people say, well, I'm going to just put mine off. That's fine. You go ahead. But I would ask for permission to do that ahead of time if you're on a call with somebody or a meeting, because typically what does that imply? Well, you're not really into it. You know, you're doing something else with your time. Okay. Well, one of the ways we build trust and rapport is through eye contact. And we can do a certain amount of that when we're online with the people we're communicating with. So I encourage you to, when you're on your Zoom calls or your whatever platform you're using, be visible. It just helps create more trust and rapport. All right, next, 3, you think a Zoom call is always necessary. Always necessary. That's the word, always. It may not be. Sometimes just a quick phone call would be fine, or maybe an email or a text, but it doesn't always have to be Zoom. You know, we do get carried away with video conferencing to some degree today. Next, number 4, you don't turn on mute. That's the word, mute. Ever. So in other words, your background noise is coming through. So, you know, as a little bit of etiquette, you want to put your mute button on. Now, at the same time, number 5, once you've turned it on, you turn it on mute, you never turn it off. So that's not good. So you want to be able to take your mute button and turn that off, because you do need to have a conversation. And here's the thing, like you're at a conference call and you got everybody there. One of the best ways to get this rhythm going, this connection with people, is everybody just have their phone unmuted so they can speak instinctively, they can speak up, they can say things. We don't have this, oh wait, you're not muted, okay, or you're muted, you got to unmute yourself. So something to think about before you begin those calls with others is how you can do that better. So that's that one. Number 6, you're hogging airtime. You know how it is, you get on a conference call and there's one person always talking, brings this up. They just don't give other people a chance to speak up. So don't be one of the people that hog airtime. 7, you're sending private messages via Zoom chat. So the word is private. So one thing to remember, if you're on a Zoom call and it's being recorded and you're sending these private messages, guess what? Whoever recorded that call will have access to that originally. So just keep that in mind. Next, let's see. 8, you're clicking out of the Zoom windows during calls. So in other words, you're on the call and you just click off the call, right? You're not there. And you think, well, I'll just come back in later. And well, again, would you do that in a real meeting with somebody? You know, if you were face to face in a conference room, would you just walk out of the room and, you know, do whatever? Just something to keep in mind. Number 9, You're treating Zoom meetings as less formal, that's the word formal, than in-person ones. So what I suggest is when you're in a Zoom call, like some of us had mentioned earlier, make sure your background looks good. Dress up, put a nice shirt on, put a nice jacket on. Definitely dress appropriately, because if you have to stand up immediately for some reason, maybe you spill coffee on yourself or something, if you're dressed in your boxer shorts or something less, that would not be appropriate. So just, have a little respect there. So that's where we're at there. All right. How about this one? Number 10, you're joining the Zoom call late or leaving early. I remember attending a number of functions a while back there before COVID. And I remember this one woman, you always knew coming to this chamber event, she'd always come late, like 15, 20 minutes late, and then she'd leave early. And I was like, why bother? Why? This is her consistent behavior. So what we're suggesting is same thing with Zoom, like don't join it. Don't join late and leave early. It just sends the wrong signals, Next, number 11, you're planning for only the top half of your outfit to be visible. Now, I mentioned that a bit earlier, but the word's visible. Don't remember, things happen. Things can happen. You never know. Number 12, you aren't looking into the camera, as someone said earlier, which makes a lot of sense. Now, it's not possible to do that all the time. And sometimes, obviously, you have a PowerPoint up like this, you're going to be looking to the side to see where the people are. And so you're not going to be looking at the camera. But when you're one-on-one or you're with a smaller group and it's possible, I would encourage you to look straight at the camera. And if you have glasses like I do, I've got these reflective glasses to screen out the blue light from the computer. Protects your eyes, by the way. Just kind of tip them down a little bit so you don't get that glare. That's important. Let me mention that. The reason they get these, I had them done at my optometrist, is because they're showing that the blue light from the computer screen, and we're in front of it a lot, does encourage macular degeneration of the eyes. So over a long period of time. So you want to protect your eyes as best you can there. Just a little aside for you there. Next, number 13, not smiling from time to time. Have a good time. Show people you enjoy being with them. Be yourself. You might even write a little sign out, a little post note, put on your screen there on the bottom. Say, hey, smile. People like to see a smile. Okay, next, 14, your viewers are looking up at the bottom of your chin. So some of us that have laptops, be careful, because look into that screen, look how they're seeing you. If you have this laptop down there and it's coming up this way on the bottom of your chin, that's not the most flattering way to view you. So what I've done is I've propped my monitor up. I have a 32-inch monitor here, and I've propped it up about, I'd say about 9 inches. So I can look straight ahead, and I'm not, for one thing, it's good for your neck not to have to look down. And at the same time, it's easier to look straight into the camera. So that's something to keep in mind. Okay, moving ahead. Number 15, you aren't giving any thought to your background setting. We talked about that earlier. Some of us have some very, very good background settings that they've got on their screen there. Now, I know in Brian's case, he's working out of his home office. Looks fantastic. It's very professional. Other people, Jeff's got a great background that he's got there. That's actually a green screen, isn't it, back there, Jeff? Something like that. Yeah, it looks really good. So we can do a lot to make that look right. It doesn't have to look like you're working out of your bedroom. So there's lots of ways to do that. You can always blur out the background, etc. All right, so next, 16, you think headphones are optional. Now, there are some very good computers today that have very good webcams that pick up what you're saying, but get equipment that's going to make your voice sound most resonant and it's easily heard. Just another part of the impression people are getting from you. They can't see you in person, but they do see your image and they do hear your voice, which is more important in some ways than what they see. So make sure you're able to be communicating properly, and the equipment you have does a nice job of picking up your voice. Okay, number 17, you aren't checking your Wi-Fi before the Zoom meeting starts. So that's a challenge. I know I went through that a couple of years ago. Everybody in the neighborhood was moving back home when we went into this COVID thing. So we upgraded to a commercial grade for the internet, paid more, but didn't have any more of these signs that kept popping up saying your bandwidth is low. So that's something you want to keep in mind. Next, 18, you're leaving yourself vulnerable to Zoom bombings. Zoom bombing. So be careful with that. I know Zoom has done some things and some of the other platforms have done some things to prevent that, but be prepared. Do whatever it is you need to prevent that. But in case something bad happens, know what you need to do, which button you need to push to stop the meeting or to take the appropriate action. Number 19, you aren't turning off your notifications before sharing your screen. So maybe you share your screen, there's all kinds of other things up there that are just clutter. May not want to do that. It just gives a wrong image. And then number 20, you're sharing your screen when it's not necessary. So in other words, you just have something up there that's not necessary. And quite frankly, I was violating that earlier. I kept a slide up there I shouldn't have kept up. All right, let's go on. I'm looking at the top of the hour. We're getting there close. Quick one. What is Slack? Some people have said, what is Slack? Well, Slack, I just threw that up there for all of us. It's a messaging app for businesses that connect people to the information they need. There's some pretty elaborate systems out there. Slack's one of them. So you don't have to be in the dark when someone says, we're going to go on Slack. Now, let's go to the next section here. Part E, bridging the digital communication gap between generations. I wanted to talk about this. Okay, so in the book, this is where most of the information is on this, but the primary rule that must be observed is to know and respect the communication preferences of the recipient. That's number 1 in your workbook under section E. So know and respect the communication preferences of the recipient. In order to do this, one must become conversant and comfortable with every communication medium in use today. So what we're saying is, if you're going to be dealing with a lot of millennials, or if you are a boomer and you're dealing with Gen Xers, or even the group that's joining the workforce now, some people call them Napsters, and there's other words that are out there. Just recognize that when in Rome, do what the Romans do. If they prefer a certain way of communicating, then you might want to learn how to communicate with them. Maybe it's a text, maybe it's another app that they use, whatever it is, be prepared for that, and you'll get along better with that other generation. Now, number 2, how technology is different for each generation. So I've got it listed in that box below there, and it kind of summarizes some things up for us here. But overall, older generations, that's boomers, tend to use their phones mostly for making calls, whereas the younger generations, a phone is their digital window to the world. Phones are used for social media, going online, texting, emailing, playing games, listening to music, and recording and watching videos. They do everything with these things. So be aware of that. But at the same time, maybe these are things we can use as well, whichever generation you are. But let's take a look. I got in the box below there, if you look, boomers. So essentially, these people are born between 1945, 1965. Current population is about 76 million. Now, they're the second largest population today. So we'll see who's taking over that in a moment. But the Gen Xers, they're born from 65 to 76. Oh, back to the boomers for a second. So we prefer a balance between email, voicemail, telephone, face-to-face communications, and meetings. That's a heads up. Gen Xers born between 65 and 76. Current population 41 million. These meetings with these folks should be only for issues that really require face-to-face communication, and they use email as their go-to communication tool. Now, don't ever be lured into thinking this is the same way for everybody that's a Gen Xer. Again, find out ahead of time what their preferences are. But generally speaking, these are some guidelines. Millennials, they're the largest group today. They're 87 million strong, born between 77 and 95, and they grew up with the internet for the most part. They have less perspective on the world where telegraphs, fax, or even cell phones were considered revolutionary means of communication. So you're having trouble getting a hold of a millennial, use the internet. They're nearly always on it. I know we have a handyman comes around, and good kid, like 27 years old, but he will not pick up his phone. He will not answer an email, but if I text him, he responds. So I got to talk his language and the way he wants to be communicated to. All right, then you got the Gen Zs, that's 96 and later, that's coming of age 2013 and onward. Current year's population 23 million. This is the first generation who grew up with a smartphone. Gen Z is used to constantly constant connectivity, more ways to communicate, i.e. chat, text, social media, and in-app comments, and fast switching between work, friends, family, and other modes. So these are generalizations, but for the most part, they can be pretty true for most people in that age group or that generation. All right, let's go on to the next section here. Number 3, rather, with each person you communicate, remember what I said earlier, ask them their number 1 and number 2 forms of preferred communication. So ask them, make that part of your first thing you want to do when you connect with these people. Number 4, be sure to let them know, as I mentioned before, let them know your 1 and 2 preferred methods of communication. Number 5, if you would like to put your title next to your Zoom name, adjust your settings. Now, some of us have done that. It's pretty easy to do, but it's a nice thing to do. It's right on your, in this case, Zoom settings. There's a little button you push and put it in there. That does communicate to people your at least status in terms of your credentials and anything else you want to have up there. And then number 6, we mentioned this earlier, make sure you have a good camera for your video calls. I'm using a Brio right now, Logitech Brio. It's got the glass lens. You used to have the regular Logitech. Now, a lot of computers, they're so far ahead of the game. Apple's tremendous with their cameras, but just make sure you have a good one. If you don't, get one. It just makes it that much easier. All right. So the last thing I want to walk into here is, what's this? Okay, the primary rule is must be observed is to know the preferred way people want to be communicated to. I'm going to go past this one. Technology is different for each generation. We mentioned that. E3, with each person you communicate with, ask them the number 1, 2 forms of preferred communication to let them know yours. And if you'd like to put your title next to your name, go into your Zoom settings to do that. Make sure you have a good webcam. Now, last couple minutes, let's dive into this. These are in your workbook. Match the digital abbreviation by drawing a line to the appropriate phrase. So if you like, go ahead and activate that little annotate crayon at the top of your bar there on your screen, and should be able to start annotating what you, in other words, we got the LOL. What does that go to? Just draw a line to, okay, yeah, that's it, laughing out loud, for your information. Now, those are old standards. Most people know them. Although I will say LOL, I thought that was lots of love. So I learned something. But they say there, go to G, Facebook, message. Okay, let's go to the next one here. Oh, got to erase that. Let's see here. Just go ahead and erase. Okay, go ahead and connect those. Yeah, talk to you later. IMO, in my opinion. TFW, that feeling when. Oh, okay, people using these. I feel your pain. Okay, MFW, my reaction when. MRW, MFW, my face when. So these are things to be familiar with. Let's erase that. Want to erase that for me, Jeff? Or I can get it. That's all right. No problem. Okay, let's go down to the next slide. How about this one? All right. Oh, I got to do this. That. Okay. So, all right. T and TL. Trying not to laugh. Okay. IDC, I don't care. JK, just kidding. ILY, I love you. ADIH, another day in hell. IMU, I miss you. Okay. And then we'll just erase those. Oops. Let's do the erase clear. Okay. Oh, all right. There we go. Next. Found one. Okay. IDC. If you get that, that's a problem. ZZZ. Sleeping, bored, tired. WYWH. Wish you were here. Time, tears in my eyes. Okay. And BAE, before anyone else. Okay. And let's see here. Let's do the eraser thing here. Thank you very much. Okay. And let's go. All right. That's where we're at. So right now, takeaways from today's program. I want you to do this. What is one thing you're going to start doing from what you've learned today? And one thing you're going to stop doing? That's what I'm looking for. And go ahead and do that. One thing you're going to stop doing, one thing you're going to start doing. And I think what I want to do is stop sharing. And let's just open up the mic there, Jeff, for everyone. Just unmute everyone. And I'd like to hear some comments from everybody. We've got 3 minutes to go, so I'd like to get your feedback. What's one thing you're going to do, or what's one thing you're going to stop doing? So who wants to go first? Just raise your hand. Yeah, go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah,
Trying to
I'm
get
gonna
'em.
start looking at the camera more.
Oh, there you go. Thank you. Thank you. Who else would like to share? Let's pop your hand up. Kristen, go ahead.
I'm going to start wearing my blue light glasses more. So thank you for that reminder. As soon as you said that, I put them on.
Good for you. Thank you for sharing that with us. Someone else. What else? Something you're going to start doing or stop doing? Yes, Michael.
Or a real shirt.
Okay, there you go. There you go. See, this is outstanding. Hey, Dr. Lord, how about you? What's one thing you picked up there?
One thing that I picked up on is, as you saw, I just turned my camera back on.
Yes, that's
No
fine.
question about that though, because I've been in the habit when someone is presenting of turning my camera off so that nothing, my movements won't distract visually from other people watching the presenter or the materials he or she is pulling up. Should I ditch that idea and just have my camera on all the time?
You know, it depends on the situation. In those kind of situations where it's pretty much going to be a PowerPoint with a talking head with the instructor, then it'd be appropriate to put yourself on, unless the instructor wants you to. I like seeing people because then I can read their body language. I can see if they're into what I'm talking about, and you know, that helps me out as a presenter. So I encourage people to keep the cameras on, but you can always check with that presenter ahead of time and see what here's another quick side for you guys. What you notice the PowerPoint slide I was using, you had a colored background. Bob Pike, he's an expert on presentations, creative training techniques. He went through a program with him. He suggests that when you have a white background, on your PowerPoint, it's harder for the eyes to keep watching that. So have a colored background. It makes it easier and softer on the retina and allows people to physically be more engaged in your presentation with that PowerPoint. Just a little side. Other thoughts here. Lori, what's one thing you're going to stop doing or start doing?
Probably going to mirror more. I always did that in person, but I didn't think about it that much on Zoom.
Well, now what was that again? You can do what?
Mirroring.
Good. Very good. Thank you. All right. Mike, how about you? Mike Giles.
Oh, for me, I just the emphasis on asking people their preferred forms of communication. The generation thing really hit me, is that I'm coming at life with my own paradigm, and I don't always stop long enough to say, who is the person am I talking to? I really know my audience, and so that I become sensitive to what their needs are. Just a change that I need to make.
Good for you, Mike. And that takes confidence to be able to say, hey, this is what I need to do. Thank you. Troy, how about you?
I'm going to share this with some of my younger staff. They're in that Gen Z category, and I think they think about things strictly in their own worldview, just like he was saying. But it's quite different when they're communicating up, and I think they're being judged far harsher than they realize sometimes.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. We'll take one more. Carmel, how about you?
Well, first of all, I'd like to thank you for sharing this information. I think it was very, very good, very straight to the point. Thank you, Jeff, for invite. I have a couple of things here. I agree with the idea to asking, the prime method of communication. I think feedback is very important. So I have to start right there. And I try to use this more and more often. I am not doing this, I think, as much as I should be doing, because the way that you explain in terms of different generations, I am an adapter, and I think I have to continue to adapt to the changes in the technology and the things the way are going right now. One question I have, I don't know if I have anything about WhatsApp for professionals, for business. Is it a matter of communication eventually is going to enhance, the way we do business in the future, just a general question. I don't know if it's something.
So,
that could be
so your
added.
question again, I'm sorry.
You using the WhatsApp, the WhatsApp
App?
available on the phone. Yeah, app. Yes.
Okay.
That's because I think it's a more straight, direct communication, right? We see a lot of commercials on things right now that everything we do using text messages and other things, everybody knows. So I don't know if that could be the future.
Could be. I think, and what companies are doing, they're coming up with their own policies to say what's appropriate in their workplace or what's appropriate with their client base. So that's just something that would be, I think it depends on that situation, and that does need to come down from the top so that there's nobody that's not understanding what they do prefer them to be doing there. So, well, all right. Well, I'll tell you what, we just went to 3:03 here. We're just a little past the hour, but what I wanted to say is I want to thank you all for participating in today's program. I hope there's some real value here that you can take out and use. We'll make the recording available afterwards. You have that workbook. I would definitely refer back to that. And one of the best ways to learn this is share this information with other people, so you will retain it even more so yourself. If you would like some information on my services or like to have a couple questions from me, feel free to contact me. That information is on the bottom of that workbook. You can reach out to me. I'd be happy to have a call with you and let you know what my perspective is on on some of your questions. But other than that, I'm going to close with a short little poem. It goes like this. Hey, life can't give you joy unless you really will it. Life just gives you time and space.
Yeah.
It's up to you to fill it.
Right. Yeah.
All right, everyone. Thank you for being here today, and look forward to speaking with you in the future if I can be of any help. Thank you.
Thank you.
Tom, thank you for your presentation today. It was awesome.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.